Welcome to Smarter Athletes Program Design Principles. This is a three-part module and it is online at smarterbcss.ca, strongerbcss.ca, I should say. These modules can be done individually. In fact, I would encourage that. You're probably looking at about 15 to 20 minutes per session. And before we even get started, we want to look at the goals that we have in a fitness program. So if we're taking a fitness course at Bill Carler Secondary, or we're taking a class that has fitness units in it as a part of a phys ed curriculum, we're always kind of looking to make sure we're servicing these four areas in order before we get started with anything, making sure that we're familiar with that first S up there, everything that kind of falls under safety, from knowing how to properly spot and increase load in a weight training facility to knowing how to prescribe or self-prescribe volume and intensity. It's all there under safety. Hopefully don't have to elaborate too much on that. I think that our department and our guidelines and programming that we run do a pretty good job of ensuring safety up front. The next one I want to talk about, though, is suitability. And in a nutshell, that's when we're talking about making sure that the programming we do design for ourselves is designed for us. It's designed for us based on our sport-specific needs or our fitness targets, our fitness goals. Is it something that is aligned with our current level of fitness IQ? Or are we kind of shooting a little bit beyond what we're capable of? Next is sustainability, and that does fall in line with suitability a little bit. When we talk about sustainability, we're essentially talking about whether or not a program is manageable long term, or whether it's something that is just too lofty to begin with, whether we've actually shot for the moon and we're not going to quite be able to manage the load over time, or the volume or intensity might be a little too high for the level that we're at. Is it sustainable long term? And my last S is self-sufficiency. And this is what we're always kind of shooting for as an end game goal. We want to make sure the athletes we're working with in our programs are athletes who can walk out the door on the final day thinking that they're pretty self-sufficient. They don't necessarily need that help anymore. They don't need anybody to be pointing them in the directions to have programming designed for them. They're quite capable of doing it themselves. And going forward, they're not going to be those people who need to spend hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars on personal trainers or strength and conditioning people. So going into the modules, the three different modules that we're going to go through in program design principles, these are them. The first module is discussing principles of programming. This is when we're going to start talking about things like program metrics, volume and intensity, how many sets, how many repetitions, how much rest should I be taking, and those variables are all going to be related to what your fitness goals are. All right, the next module, we do actually dive into sports science a little bit. And in the final module, we'll talk about recovery, why it's important, and maybe some of the misconceptions around recovery as well. And all of this is going to go back to this word that we use a lot in this course, which is deliberate practice. And if you know me and you work with me, you've heard me say it before. Deliberate practice is that meaningful and purposeful training that's actually going to make you better. It is, make no mistake, hard work. It's certainly not easy. It's often not very fun. It is, though, the work that is going to make you better, to make you more meaningfully and purposefully trained. And when we talk about that pathway to excellence or long-term athlete development, deliberate practice is a term that is frequently used through a variety of lenses, and we make no shortage of using it through the Smarter Athletes program as well. So getting started right away, our first module is the principles of programming. And when we're starting here, we're doing it because we want to make sure that what we choose to do aligns with the goals that we have. We want to understand the strategies that have to do with volume and intensity in our programming. When we're choosing those metrics of how many sets and how many reps and how much weight should I be lifting or what intensity should I be working at, we want to make sure that we're making those choices not because we're pulling them out of thin air, but because they align with the goals that we've set up for ourselves. We also want to make sure we know when it's time to take a day off or step back with that intensity or that volume over and give ourselves a bit of a break and make some meaningful decisions around recovery so that we actually get better as a result of taking those recovery days. And all this is going to add up to making real progress with our training program and getting a little bit closer to those goals that we set out at the beginning. So before anything else, we'll talk about this as a part 1, programming, principles, and strategies. This is module number 1. So eventually in a course like fitness, or even a course that has a fitness curriculum as a part of it, you probably will have an opportunity to design and execute your own fitness program. There are always going to be these 2 rules though. The program needs to make sense. You have to be able to explain why it makes sense. Those 2 things go hand in hand. You have to be able to say, I've chosen these exercises because these are my goals. And these are my goals because this is the sport I play, and these are the jobs that I have, that I'm responsible for in that sport, or in that position in that sport. So those are kind of things that we want to always be able to do as athletes who do strength and conditioning work, as opposed to just fitness enthusiasts who find themselves at the gym doing a random workout after school or after work. So we need to be able to answer those 2 questions. We need to be able to explain that it makes sense, and we need to be able to answer somebody, why are you specifically choosing these exercises, and how are they servicing your position or your role in the sport that you play. All right. So when we're selecting those exercises, they should really align with the goals that we have. We should be thinking about the sport-specific muscle actions and the energy systems, and we will talk a little bit more about energy systems. It comes along a little later in another Smarter Athletes course in a few different modules as well, but we'll get there. And lastly, we should make sure our programming is balanced. And we'll talk about balance a little bit more in this module, but in a nutshell, and we will come back to it, when we're talking about balance, we're talking about making sure that we're working muscle groups with an equal amount of stress. So we're looking at a full body approach. We're looking at muscle actions such as push and pull. We're looking at muscle actions like the squat and the hinge. We're making sure that we're focusing as much on unilateral or single side training as we are on those big, powerful bilateral movements. We're making sure that we're not neglecting exercises that are aligned with things like injury prevention or improved stability and mobility for the sake of selecting more exercises that are going to make us feel the burn or look good. We want to make sure that it's all there, and that's really in a nutshell what I'm referring to when I'm talking about balanced programming. And when we go to exercise selection, we're talking about exercises that benefit us when it comes to the areas we're trying to improve in, of course, but that could mean an exhaustive list. And by no means are you expected to understand every single one of these terms here, but this is by no means an all-encompassing list of fitness topics or types of exercises that you could be selecting. This is just to give you a vague idea of how much variety there is and how many reasons there are out there to kind of categorically choose from different types of exercise, and everybody here or everybody watching this presentation is going to have different reasons for choosing the exercises that they do, but hopefully that can always come back to goal alignment. And if you're looking at this slide with a little bit more detail and attention, these are some of the buzzwords, so to speak, that you might be using when you are explaining why those exercises have ended up in the program that you've designed for yourself. Quickly, if we're looking at maybe an exercise selection protocol, we want to start with a goal, and then we want to move to a system, and then we want to look at the muscle actions. So the question here is, do the movements and the muscle groups involved complement your sport-specific goal or training target? And so if we look at the top row here, we're saying, okay, well, the goal is to improve the vertical jump. So as a system, we're going to recognize that as power and lower body strength. And then when we look at the muscle actions that are directly related to that muscular system and that goal itself, we're going to look at muscle actions like the squat and the squat jump. And all of a sudden, when we kind of line these 3 columns up, exercise selection doesn't necessarily seem that difficult. Let's look at the 3rd row and say the goal is to increase upper body lean mass. And we call that system, this is a scientific word, I guess, when we talk about sports science, so if it's not a familiar term, you'll become familiar with it. It's hypertrophy. Hypertrophy is the fancy word for an increase in lean body mass, or the increase in the amount of cross-sectional area in muscle. And so essentially what we're looking to do when we're trying to increase lean body mass, we're trying to hypertrophy muscle. And the muscle actions that are going to align with doing that in the upper body are those upper body exercises at sub-maximal loads. That means near maximum, but not quite maximum. So somewhere around that 6 to 10 repetition range. And those are going to be the exercises like the bench press and the pull-up and the row. So exercises that target the push and the pull of those upper body muscles at sub-maximal loads. And this is, again, by no means an all-encompassing list. It's got 6 great examples of how we would align a goal with a system and a muscle action. All right, so again, if we're just looking at them in single, and I would encourage you to go back and do this, pick apart the one row at a time, and really kind of your own application here is to kind of move along here from column 1 to 2 to 3, and make sure that you can fill all of those in with your own self-sufficiency. Normally as a group, if we're doing this presentation in a classroom and you're not watching it online, we are doing this as an application. This table is blank and students are calling out the fields and we're filling them in together as a group. Obviously, I don't have the opportunity to do that with you now, and this is the next best thing. When we're setting this up, let's make sure that we can fill this table out: goal, system, muscle, action. All right. Again, here's one more example. Second row from the bottom. The goal is to reduce the chronic knee injury likelihood or knee re-injury likelihood, maybe in somebody who's had a chronic knee injury in the past. So as a system, we're going to talk about the lower body muscular endurance. So all those muscles that support the knee joint in its flexion and extension, and not necessarily their ability to produce powerful, forceful contraction, but to have really good muscular endurance. We're talking about that because it's a chronic injury. That means it's an injury that's been caused by repetitive stress. So if we want to reduce the likelihood of repetitive stress causing an injury, we want to improve muscular endurance, or the tolerance of the muscles that would otherwise be giving up on that joint. All right, so now we're talking about maybe single leg exercises that are accessory exercises. That's what ACC stands for there. And there's single leg exercises with very specific set, rep, and load protocols that align with muscular endurance. And in just a few minutes, we're going to kind of look at some, what I kind of call the cheat sheets of making sure that we're aligning our set, our rep, and our load protocols with the right muscular system. Here they are. When I do programming with individuals or with groups, these are what I refer to as the cheat sheets. On the left, we have the muscular system cheat sheet, and on the right, we have the energy system cheat sheet. So the muscular system cheat sheet on the right, or the left, sorry, has muscular endurance, hypertrophy, strength, power, and peak power. So if we're identifying a system that we want to improve, right alongside of those systems are the sets, the repetitions, the percentages of the 1 rep max that we should be working with, and the rest intervals. That's the rest that is interset. So after doing one set of exercise, how much rest should we be taking before we commence the next set? All right. On the right table is the energy system. And we will talk a lot more about energy systems in a separate Smarter Athletes course. That's one on Energy Systems 101 if you're interested. But the energy systems, oxidative being that slow aerobic jogging system, through slow glycolysis, a little bit faster like a run or a hard jog, moving through to fast glycolysis. That's like your 400-meter hard run, and your phosphagen system, which is your all-out maximal explosive effort, maybe a 50-yard or a 60-yard sprint. And those are the durations that they typically last for, the intensity or the percentage of your rate of perceived exertion, and the amount of recovery or rest you should be taking between those repeats. So again, if we're programming for ourselves from a muscular system standpoint or for an energy system standpoint, these are extremely helpful tools that I hope you will make good use of when designing your programs. Now, when setting up your programming, to achieve balance and order with respect to muscle actions and groups, we really want to make sure that we're doing things like balancing out our primary and secondary work. And if you're not already familiar with distinguishing between primary and secondary work, we're talking about with respect to primary work are those bigger, usually multi-joint exercises that produce a lot more fatigue, and they should usually be happening at the forefront or the front of a workout. After the warm-up, we move into our primary exercise. They take the most energy from us, and therefore we want to perform those exercises when we're still the freshest in the workout, so to speak. Then we can move into those secondary groups and accessory groups later on. So this is just an example of one page from a program that I've done with one of the athletes that I work with at the school. And you can see here that she's starting with her warm-up, but following it with her primary core lifts, being the barbell back squat, the free weight bench press, and the free weight row. Then she moves into some secondary work, which is for her in this particular workout, unilateral lower body strength. That means single leg lower body strength. She's performing a split squat and a lateral split squat using the TRX suspension training. She's moving into a free weight single leg deadlift. And then at the very end, she's got some accessory core strength work where she's using a medicine ball and a stability ball. And to be perfectly honest, this work at the end is probably not very fatiguing for her. And so the order of operation here is actually pretty crucial. How we put something like the back squat or the free weight bench press near the end of the workout when she was experiencing a lot more fatigue would probably be far less likely to get a good and meaningful result from her work there. So we want to make sure that the primary work is at the forefront of the workout after the warm-up. Always identifying the purpose of the work as well. So you can see here when we've highlighted these rows, under primary, we've identified core lifts, full body, barbell, and free weight exercises. Under secondary, we've said they're unilateral lower body strength work, suspension training, and free weight. And under accessory, we said it's functional core strength work, medicine ball, and stability ball. This is really helpful for the athlete you're working with. Even as a subtitle, it kind of provides them with a little bit of a heads up about what kind of equipment they might be using in that particular section of the workout. So always identifying the purpose of the work here really sets you up for a successful program. The next thing we want to look at is making sure that the metrics align with the training targets. And we don't really need to spend too much time here talking about this, since I did just show them to you in those cheat sheets before. But if you want to go back and have a look at those, now would be a good time to do it. These are the metrics that align exactly with what we were looking at earlier: the set, the repetition, the percentage of the 1 repetition max, and the rest interset. Now you can see with this particular athlete, we haven't actually included a percentage of a 1 repetition max. And that's because this is a relatively beginner level strength program. And when we do these types of programs, rather than prescribing a percentage of the 1 repetition max, we find a lot more success with giving a repetition range. So you see in the second column where I've given a repetition range of 6 to 10, I'm simply asking for the minimum number of repetitions completed to be 6, but the maximum to be 10. Essentially, I'm telling the athlete in this particular situation that if they can do 10 repetitions, I'd like them to try an increase in the load. But if they cannot make it to a minimum of 6, we can recognize that the load is too heavy or too intense. And that's the end of part 1. So go back through the program design principles that we discussed here. If you have any questions about them, you're always more than welcome to send me a message at derek.virgo@wiredsb.ca.